Hello. First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to the Learn WordPress team, in particular to Francisco Vera for leading the design work. This is a great site. I'll put it up in a moment, but even after working with WordPress for many years, I sometimes have questions about what a specific file does, what the logical code flow looks like in certain situations, if I'm trying to optimize for performance, or if I'm looking for a specific hook or action and want to know where it comes from. It's tough because you have to go through the code and the documentation. I'll leave it at that. And so, as soon as I learned about the new version of Learn WordPress from a post by Nick Diego, I jumped right in. It is a great site. As you can see, it's very clean. You can see the courses, you can see what it's about. If you're just here to learn how to use WordPress, it's great. It's got something for beginners, intermediate, advanced. I'm gonna send customers here as well, just so that they can know how to use the block editor and how things work with posts and other things. But what I really want to talk about today is the developer part of it, because they've got beginner WordPress, they've got stuff for themes as well. It's very clear. And this particular course, the beginner WordPress developer course, is fantastic because it covers all these things, like what are web servers in the context of WordPress, and the file structure and how the database is structured, and what does a front page request look like. And that is something that I was asking myself a few days ago, specifically to know which actions run in which order, what is really going on, and this just answered all those questions for me. So as a function of me going through these concepts again in a very clear way, I decided to record this video and some other videos as well, just so that I can share what I found and also reteach myself some of these concepts and teach some new concepts that I wasn't aware of. So I hope this helps some people. You can find everything I'm talking about directly on learn.wordpress.org and take the courses there. But I'm just going to go through the information in my way, show you on my screen, and if it helps you, great. If not, at least it'll help me to refresh the content. So let's go into what is WordPress, the file system itself. So if you install WordPress, you get something like this. Is just a basic WordPress install. And if we go into VS Code and look at the structure, we're going to see a lot of files. And this might be confusing to some people, others not so much, but it's actually quite straightforward. Like any other software, it's just a collection of files that are run. In this case, it's PHP. That's what's running on the server. So if we examine the root directory here on the left, we can see that we've got 3 folders: WP admin, WP content, WP includes. I'll discuss them in a few moments. And then we've got some files. So getting some of them out of the way, we've got some files that are not completely relevant, which are the license and the README files. They're relevant, but they're not relevant to how it's processed. So the index, if we go over here, and the license, this license is just giving us information about the GNU license. You can go ahead and read it and how it can be shared and transmitted and modified and distributed. The README file is going to give us information about installing it, system requirements, etc. Remember, as much as a lot of people are just going to use what the hosting provider gives you, they might give you a full install out of the box. It might be managed hosting, or you might actually be getting a bare bones server and you're installing it on your own. So you might need some of this stuff as well as some of the files that I'm going to mention. But in many cases, you're not going to need them because the host provider, especially if it's managed hosting or if you're using WP.com or WP Cloud, Kinsta WP Engine, Big Scooch, whatever, it's just going to be there. You don't have to think about it. So let's go into the actual files that make sense for the context of a request. First of all, we've got index. So index is going to be our starting point. This is the first file that is hit when someone tries to visit the root URL of a site. So mysite.com, they'll get index.php. Index.php in turn loads WP blog header PHP, which then loads WP load, which in turn uses WP config. So if we look at this, here it is loading it, and then we go to this one down here, we see that it's using WP load, which in turn will do a lot of different things, but it's gonna require this information from the WP config. So this is the first file that you may touch at some point, unless you're doing very advanced stuff, which we might cover in other videos. WP config is where you have your configuration. Let's open it down here. That is where we have where the database is, maybe the IP to the database, how do we connect to it, the user, the password. We've got the salts. Don't worry, this is a local trash environment that it's gonna disappear. You can copy that if you want. I don't really care. So this is a file you don't want to share with anyone. Of course, these are sensitive items and should be hidden at all costs. You've got the table prefix, if you're using WP debug or not, what the environment is. Again, we might talk about this in another video. Keep in mind, very important file. Then after this, at the very end, it's gonna load WP settings, and WP settings starts the whole process. So basically it sets up all the WordPress core functionality. So everything here, this there we go. So all this is what it's doing, and you can see a lot of things here. If you're curious, you can go in here. You can see where it's registering the fatal error handler, which I've had some fun with, which should load very early on because it should handle errors and do something about them. Time zone, variables, we've got them checking if we're in maintenance mode, checking if we're in debug mode, etc. And then some caching stuff, and it just starts loading the files that it needs, translations, etc. A lot of things are going on here. As you can see, all these files, and I'll show you where most of these are in a second. And that's it, and we start the process, right? So in another video, I'm going to talk about what that process looks like, what it's actually doing, because this might be overwhelming. There's a lot of code here, but we're gonna go through it in another video as well. Just know, again, very important file right here. So that's basically it for the main structure, and then we have some additional files that are there because they might be used by going directly to them for certain requests or for some other things like WP activate. So WP activate over here, if we open it up and I can find it, is used to confirm the activation key. Again, this is something if you're starting WordPress off of a bare bones server, you do this process where it sends you an email, you sign up for a site, you would do that. Or you might do it if you're doing a multi-site network. WP comments post is used to process comments. And so that one is, if any comment is submitted to the site, this is the file that processes the comments and decides what to do. And then we have WP cron. This is a very important file. You may or may not use it specifically because your host might provide some of the cron activity, but WP cron basically runs on every single request, and it checks if there are any scheduled tasks that need to be run, and they will run if they are. And so that's why sometimes you might go to a page when it will take 200 milliseconds to run, and sometimes it'll take 2 seconds to run. It's the same page, and you don't really understand why it happened in some point in time. Maybe it's because you were hitting the page right when there were a lot of scheduled tasks that needed to run. And so that is WP cron. Very important as well, because there are a lot of scheduled tasks, especially if you're running commerce or memberships or anything that requires checks to be done periodically. WP links OPML is used to generate an XML list of links, which is not used anymore, but you can enable it if you want it. That one stopped being a thing in 3.5, but it's there. It could be activated with a plugin. WP login PHP, that is used to display the login form for the WordPress site and processes any login requests that are submitted. WP mail, as the name implies, is used by the post via email feature. So whenever you have that enabled in your settings, we might see this in another video, it allows you to publish posts by sending an email to a specific address. So if that's enabled, WP mail is the file that will handle that. WP signup is used to display the signup form for a new site in a WordPress multi-site network. Trackback, this one here, is used to process trackbacks. So if another site links to your site and you have trackback functionality enabled, it's how this is going to be processed. And XML RPC is used to process remote procedure call events. If you're not using apps to manage the site, then you might not need it, and you might disable it even, but that's what this file does. Again, all these last files that I mentioned are not part of the regular WordPress process when you just visit the site, but they're there because they're important. And so apart from that, like I said early on, we've got WP admin. This is everything related to the admin, the backend side of things. So that's if you visit WP admin, and you might go to WP admin / and then a specific directory or specific path that will take you to that place. Maybe you're managing posts, maybe you're managing products, maybe you're managing orders or anything like that. All that lives within WP admin. These are all the files that are processed, like edit comments, edit form, edit tags, and taxonomies, all that sort of stuff is managed there. Any JavaScript or CSS that is required in that is also within this folder. WP content is where you most likely will live if you're working with any sort of files within your site. That's because that's where your plugins live. So that's where you are going to install any plugins. And then that's where your theme lives. So either you're using a theme like 2024 or your own theme, that's where it lives. And that's where the files for the theme are. And we'll talk about that in another video too. And then you've got the uploads folder, which will, depending on your settings, fit all the media. Whenever you upload something to the site, it will put it maybe year, month, day, or any other sort of organization that you're using. So those are very important directories. And then WP includes, you will very likely never want to touch because that's where all core WordPress lives. So anytime you do an update to WordPress, those files might be overwritten. And so you don't want to touch those. If you ever want to modify some sort of functionality, you will want to use hooks and filters, and there's ways to do that. So we'll discuss that in another video. But this is just a small overview of what the WordPress file structure looks like. In another video, we'll discuss the WordPress database, which is another important topic that helps us understand how WordPress works. And then we might get into more advanced stuff. But I hope this was helpful. Let me know which other video you want regarding how WordPress works or what's behind the scenes in WordPress, and I'll be happy to record a video for it. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want or if you like the content. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.